Councilwoman Turner, you are live.
Sage, you need to unmute.
Good morning, everyone. I am Chair Sage Turner, and I'd like to welcome you to the November 16th Housing and Community Development Committee meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We're streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. That number is 855-925-2801. You will enter the code 9791. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, you use that same number, 855-925-2801, and meeting code 9791. When you call, your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, callers will hear for more options. Please press star. Pressing *3 will allow callers to continue to listen live and join a speaker queue. That's *3, and each caller will have 3 minutes to speak. As a general reminder to everyone participating today, if you could stay on mute until you need to speak or be called upon. If you need to, you can raise your hand and I will create a stack and we can call on folks as we go. All right, so now I'm going to go through a roll call and introduce all the committee members and staff who are participating with us virtually. As I call your name, please unmute and say a quick hello. Vice Mayor Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
Our treat, City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Interim Community and Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
Community Development Program Director Paul D'Angelo.
Good morning, everyone. And that is no longer interim for Nikki. She is permanent.
I wasn't sure
Thank you. I was about to jump in there and say that, Paul. Thank you.
That's great. So congratulations to no longer interim Community and Economic Development Director Nikki Reed. Okay, everyone, we are through roll call. Unless I missed any city folks that are attending. Oh, I do see we have Attorney Janice Ashley with us today.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, I think I got everyone. Okay, we are going to start on the agenda item number 1, which is approval of the minutes. Fellow Councilwoman, did you get a chance to review? Are there any changes, comments to the action minutes? If not, may I get a motion?
So move.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Myself, Sage Turner. Aye. The minutes have passed. Okay. We're going to move on to item number 2, which is community development, CDBG, and CV and homeless updates. We have Paul with us today. We have 3 extensive documents with lengthy updates. Any comments, questions? Or Paul, would you like to point anything out that you wanted to highlight before we ask any questions?
Yeah, that would be great. We have a little bit of a surprise with our affordable housing calculator we wanted to share really quick. But just a couple things on community development updates to run through. We did update the Housing Trust Fund balance. We usually do that quarterly. So that has been updated in that link. We are seeing some more interest in Oak Hill. And then some updates, a few more things. We've completed our CDBG and home monitoring. So that is done. We've cleared that. We have one group that we're still working with there. We've had our agreement meetings for the 21-22 applications. So we're meeting individually with our partners to go over those agreements and scopes of work. That's going great. We're learning a lot and getting together with our partners. Our environmental review process, if y'all remember, we were being monitored by HUD on that. We will be exiting that any day now, as well as developing a SHPO agreement with the State Historic Office in Raleigh. And CDBG training occurred, and we also did a listening session on draw request. So just a bunch of those kind of like admin-y things that we're always trying to get to that are kind of coming to a head, which is great. And then last but not least, we wanted to let everybody know that the HUD applications for funding, those are going to come out. That application should be released on December 13th, give or take, with a due date of February 4th. We will release that's the fiscal year 22-23 applications for HUD funding. We will be asking applicants to focus on the highest priority needs in the consolidated plan. The consolidated plan is carried out through those annual action plans and then reported on in our CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. So this applications will focus on those priority needs: new rental housing at or below 60% AMI, special needs housing, creating sustainable jobs for low-income persons, job training and placement, developing multimodal transportation, services that support affordable housing, and ending homelessness. Like last year's application or last year's process, applications that are incomplete or ineligible won't be moved forward, but we're getting those out on December 13th. We're really excited about that. We're reviewing that application process. And then last but not least, we do have something to showcase, which the team has developed an affordable housing calculator. So working in partnership with IT and Christina Harris, who is our city coordinator, who is amazing, who took all these thoughts in my brain and was able to work with me in partnership to develop a calculator that will be on our website as another resource tool. So people can take a moment to put in their income, actually look at the real taxes in Asheville and Buncombe County, and then be able to show folks what they can afford. While this is a really important resource exercise, please know that our team realizes, like most folks in our community, homeownership is difficult at the moment, to say the least. But if this is a really personal guide to Asheville, we feel like it could be a good place to start. And Christina, if you want to share your screen and walk through that, that would be great, just for a few minutes. And we would appreciate that time, Councilwoman Turner, just to showcase. It'll go live next week.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, should I make the font bigger or is this good?
I think it's good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Paul, for that introduction. And yes, we have been working on a affordable housing calculator, strongly with our IT department, mainly Rick Barley. Thanks to him, he really kind of constructed this, and like Paul mentioned before, took, our ideas and was able to actually bring that to life. So really, really grateful. So I'm just going to scroll up here. We do have like a little introduction for the home ownership calculator. As you scroll down here, whomever is interacting with this affordable housing calculator will be able to input any of the information they would like to. So we have the categories here of gross annual household income, a household size, we could say 4 people, home price, we could do that around $273, the down payment amount, which is roughly $61,000, then a mortgage rate of 3.7. And once we input that information, we can hit this button here that says click to update results. And this will really give a good overview of what someone is looking to potentially afford in the Asheville area. Now, with kind of that information being said and stated, we are working with a loan specialist to kind of help get some of this terminology correct when it comes to this calculator. And then also when it comes to, the situation here in Asheville, North Carolina. So this is still kind of a work in progress, but, we are making headway, and we do have a meeting with him today to go over some of the details here. But moving back to the calculator, once someone enters in the information on this left-hand side, will pop over on the right-hand side and look at the estimated monthly payment, which they should be looking to do about $1,333. And as we kind of look down, we'll do a general overview and then a detail overview of what exactly a citizen should be looking to afford. Does anyone have any questions?
Christina, great job. And
Yeah.
Again, to the team here putting this together with IT and everybody.
Mhm.
The part we're working on with Paul Heathman, who is on the AHAC committee, is just those little individual eyes, those information dots, so that we really want to make sure that that language is concise and accurate. And then the estimated monthly payment would be green for good, yellow for you might have a caution, and red that you're overburdened. And this kind of goes along with our Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 that we've developed as well as part of our resource guide. But what we liked about this was it really focuses those taxes you're going to pay are Asheville tax rates. And so it's something for us to put out there. And again, just to reiterate, we do realize homeownership is very difficult for our community. And but if this is a start that people can start figuring out what they can afford, we feel like it's a step one, and we added to our resource guide by Wednesday of next week. Appreciate the time, everybody, just to show this. Thank you very much.
It's a great tool. Thank you to everyone who's been working on it. I think it really helps flush out just basics for folks. I'm wondering, something that came up, we get this question a lot in the community. What is AMI? What's it mean? Why do we target 60, 80? I wonder if, since folks are going to designate their income, if it could just have another little info there of what that puts them at, what percentage of 80 or what percentage of AMI, so they know where they sit in that range.
We might be able to add that so they know where they fit on that HUD chart. We can possibly do that with IT.
Great.
Can you pull that AMI chart up one more time so I can write those down?
It's in our documents too. And for those of you listening at home, all of these tables and information are a part of our community development updates, which are listed on our website and have a lot of information about all projects, but also keeps things like the Housing Trust Fund balance and this particular information, which we update every year from HUD.
And also on our community development website under affordable housing resources and tools.
Correct. Yeah, I'm thinking calculating where they fall in the AMI should just be one more mathematical equation. Might be neat for people to start thinking about, connecting where they are in that figure we point out. Any other questions from counselors? Okay. Well, great to have a new tool. Thank you for putting that together, everyone, and getting it out so quickly. What about the rest of the updates? I have a few questions. I'll defer to my fellow councilwomen first. Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions. Well, an acknowledgement of the information that was contained in our packet relating to the questions I asked for last meeting. Do you want me to move forward with those, or do you want to?
No, that'd be great. Let's just give folks a place of where we're at. So we have 3 updates, and I believe the one you are talking about is under, item 2, community development updates. Doesn't say COVID, doesn't say CDBG, that document. Okay.
Yeah, it's under the portion, and maybe I'm in the wrong document, that says others and then HCD council requests.
Yes, so that would be on page, looks like,
5.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for the information. Just as a refresher, you'll recall in the last meeting, I requested a couple of things, and the committee indicated that it wanted to get an update. So we asked for the demographic makeup of developers we've partnered with or incentivized over the past 5 years, and the demographic makeup of the tenants that we partnered, of the developments we partnered with. I also was interested in incomes for African Americans in our community. I saw 30%, 50% AMI, 60% AMI, 80%. Because I wanted to see where members of the African American community fit in as related to the community as a whole. Not surprisingly, and thank you, Janice, for the legal discussion. I suspect, and perhaps someone who's been here more than 5 years can help. I suspect that over the past 5 years, if we've had any African Americans that we've incentivized, does anyone know if there's literally been one?
You mean developers or contractors, or just the project, the owner? Could you give me a little?
For developers.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we did. The only one I can think of that was African American is still yet to be built. It was recently approved. It was the gentleman that wanted to build the 12 homes and got a $1.2 or $1.3 million funding, and then
that came back, right?
Yeah, I think it's coming back, and it might have some stalling. So I'm not sure of that final detail.
Is it our understanding that over the past 5 years that the number is 0?
As far as developers and applicants, that's all I could think of, but I didn't look back 5 years. That was just from memory.
Okay, and I understand how we would not by law be able to require. Did we inquire from the folks that we've incentivized whether they would willingly give us the demographic information if they had it?
Gosh, I don't know the answer to that.
So, excuse me, go ahead.
Oh, apologies, Councilwoman Mosley. No, we have not inquired. We did the initial research and then added that new section of HCD council request. So working with Janice and getting that language and so bringing it back today to see, any direction from HCD council on what they wanted to do. But we have not taken a step forward to inquire about voluntarily submitting that information.
And going to the comments relating to the Bowen report, I appreciate that data isn't available. So perhaps if there is an enterprising journalist out there who could help us, that would be greatly appreciated. I just know intuitively, but also based on data that I've seen before this year, speaking of Dr. Mullins, the state of Black Asheville, and I believe I saw an article that Joel Burgess from the Asheville Citizen-Times wrote a few years ago, where he laid out the difference in incomes. And if the trend holds true, and I'm inclined to believe that the trend has probably worsened since that time, considering 50% AMI, I feel confident in assuming that more than 50% of the African American population is below that 50% AMI. At least that's what it has been in the most recent past. So speaking from an equitable lens, it would follow then that actually the majority of folks that move into affordable housing would need to be Black or Brown. The reason I'm bringing that up is our policy seems to be 80% as the goal, and then in other times, 60% of that as the goal, which means by definition, we are excluding the majority of African Americans in our community. So while the policy on its face may not appear to be harmful, it triggers legal concerns for me. And that is why I proposed that we handle 319 Biltmore, the site of the old Matthews Ford dealership, a little differently. I saw it as a way to infuse equity in pretty short order into a particular location that would be important to the African American community. As it turns out, the majority of the council did not agree with that approach, but I will take the opportunity to thank Vice Mayor Smith for supporting that opportunity as the only one, frankly, who expressed support repeatedly. So, and in smaller discussions, I realized that some of our colleagues were a little uncertain about the specificity that I suggested for members of the Black community. Some said that there was nothing in our policy that was being violated by what was proposed initially at 319. And another council member mentioned, fear of even going to jail as a result of moving forward in the way I proposed. So my thought today is I feel as though, and based on my legal experience, that if we continue down the path we're going, we're opening ourselves up to substantial disparate impact lawsuits because the proportion of the developers that we agree to or who is being housed is not readily available to African Americans. I was in a meeting, and the last time actually I spoke with Paul, I was in a meeting with a developer, and the developer was expressing angst. That was not surprising to me because, frankly, every time I have a conversation with a developer, there's angst. And partially because there's a feeling that they don't know where we're going with our policies, almost like we agree on a whim. And so in that meeting, I said, based on our results, perhaps we should enter into a moratorium as it relates to who we incentivize and how we move forward with affordable housing, because the way we're doing it now does not seem to be working. I even discussed the possibility with this developer of coming up with a design much like I requested for 319, meaning a place where there is actual home ownership available. So I would like to see if other colleagues would be interested in having a discussion about a moratorium in our upcoming meetings.
And Council, if I could interject and just understand, the last time that we had a moratorium, it was around a zoning issue related to hotels. And so if we are going to discuss a moratorium, because that obviously, as most of you know, that this is a legal thing that would impact us, not just policy perspective, we need to have some way of saying, what we are going to do as a result of kind of this, so to speak, moratorium. And maybe that isn't the appropriate
The purpose
word.
would be to come up with a policy that is not in its impact discriminatory.
So Paul and Nikki, let's clarify. I thought as part of the last workshop that we had, we were considering 60% AMI as our policy. Did I blank and miss that? Or?
60% AMI is likely higher than more than half of African Americans in our city earn.
I think it's
perhaps
a little, but
Yeah.
let's get us all on the same page for a second, because we're getting a little off the updates, and I appreciate this discussion very much, because I think we all have the same goal of impacting those who need it the most. What I'm getting a little worried about here is my research brain is coming on. So we're asking questions and moving on thoughts that we don't know necessarily to be factual. We have a lot of discovery here.
Which
So
is
I'm
why I
wondering-
suggested we discuss
I
it
get
in a later meeting when we actually have the data.
Right. So I think what we need to do here is maybe come up with some key data that we would need to even be able to have these discussions. Like, I get that you requested, but the answer so far was we don't necessarily have all that. So it sounds like we need someone to study Bowen. We need to better understand. Well, I guess I have a question. I want to better understand the HACA vouchers, but you actually requested that data be separated as outliers. Did I get that
No,
right?
I requested that we not get info for funds that we gave to the housing authority.
Oh, okay. Just the funds that went to them. I'm making sure I get this. Okay. Because the goal here, for those of you listening at home, 'cause I know we get into technical a lot, is to figure out if the programs we have in place are impacting those who we want to impact. And particularly in this discussion, whether or not it's helping minority low income. And it sounds like what I'm hearing from you say, Councilwoman Mosley, is that your concern is that there are folks that are below the target AMIs. And when we do these projects and we tell developers to target 60 AMI, that they're actually targeting 60. They're not targeting 54. They're not targeting 45. So we're saying, there's a possibility that those that need the help are being overlooked because people are taking the high end of the policy. So sounds like more discussion for sure, whether or not that happens at HCD, or maybe goes back to AHAC even. What do you think about that, Councilwoman Mosley? Because AHAC is your liaison.
I prefer to do it here.
For here, okay.
Because what I'm seeing and what is becoming a general consensus in the community is that we're providing affordable housing for white people. And I am unable to disabuse that notion based on data.
Right, understandably. Okay. As far as a moratorium, I think there are legal components to that in land use. I also would hesitate to put a moratorium on anything that's producing affordability in such a dire time, but I think that possibly both could be concurrent. That's obviously not up to me, so let's have a group discussion about it and plan
That's
on.
why I requested that we discuss it in a further meeting, because what is happening is, and this is now an equity discussion, by continuing to move forward in the same path, when everyone has seen that equity picture where there's like the hill and there's one child at the bottom of the hill and another one here, and then there's the fence. When we continue to do 60 or 80% and a population is practically through data excluded, we're improving the condition for this group without necessarily improving that group. And then the disparity gets greater and greater. So the longer we continue with the policy is actually resulting in more harm for the group that, from an equitable standpoint, needs the most help. And so that's my thought process as it relates to that. So again, we could continue to go forward and forward and forward and perpetuating more and more harm if that's the desire of the committee.
How often do we do a bowling report update? Is there an update on our bowling report?
I believe it would be, Paul, isn't that scheduled for this coming year?
So
2022?
yeah, and quickly, hopefully I can just offer a bit of clarity, and thank you, Councilwoman Mosley, for these conversations, because they're really, really important for our community. A couple quick things regarding our policy, which really at this point, the fully updated our fee rebates and Luigi. They are focused on individuals and families at or below 80% AMI, with half of those units accepting housing choice vouchers. So that's a requirement for those vouchers. In the studies I've seen, a majority of the individuals and families who hold vouchers are African American. And so that's our policies move forward. We are hoping that we'll start seeing data that shows that we are not only looking at the area median incomes, but in particular, our partnership to move those housing choice vouchers that currently sit on the street with no one accepting them. And so we're trying to incentivize that with our policies, as well as hopefully have a larger reach into our community. Particularly like we spoke last week about the marketing efforts we are now requiring our folks to do with the immediate businesses and the churches and the activities in the immediate like half-mile radius. That said, for solutions purposes, we are going to be working or put out an RFP for the research we need to do around the home ARPA funds. And it's also spring of 2022. It's time for us to do our mid-year Bowen update for Asheville and Buncombe counties, so we can get data perhaps for more of these specific things y'all are looking at. The only thing I had noted in the update document, Councilwoman Mosley, was apparently the data collected in the 2020 census was not great. However, by partnering with someone, I think that they can perhaps find a way to dig better. And last but not least, we do recognize the HUD AMIs are the overall Asheville region. But when we take our meetings out into the community, we are told more often than not that those salaries don't represent their community. We do need to hold it to some standard, like the HUD standard, but we do hear you on that the community has told us that as well, which is why we're always trying to figure out in our policies ways to incentivize all the AMIs. Vouchers at 60% AMI, those individuals and families, last thought I promise, are at 30, 50, 60% AMI. So we're hitting all those AMIs, and that hopefully maybe paints a little bit of a picture. But I think there's some solutions here in the next Bowen report. Thank you.
And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate your hard work. And I'm certainly glad that you brought up ARPA funding, because when we talk about COVID-19, you know, the saying is that when white America gets the cold, Black America gets the flu. And so I remember early on in the pandemic, when it was revealed that Black and Brown folks were disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So it seems to me, again, from an equitable standpoint, that when we get an opportunity to decide how to spend the funding would disproportionately go to those who were disproportionately affected. Just keeping that in mind, because I haven't seen that discussion quite yet. So even when we're talking about funding for those who are unhoused, if Black and Brown are disproportionately unhoused, I'm wondering if we need to have some type of policy that even in those cases, we need to make sure that the organizations providing the help have an equitable plan in place as well. But again, my hope is that we will have this further discussion in another meeting and perhaps bring in legal to discuss if a moratorium is in fact available to us. I look at it as protecting ourselves from a legal standpoint.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Mosley. Any other thoughts or comments from council or staff
I
regarding
just
this?
have a question for Deborah or legal. If you were to think about going into a moratorium, it seems that you have to make a case for that. You have to have data to support that. Will the Bowen report be substantial enough for us to consider moratorium? And then I know also, if you propose a moratorium, you have to have some kind of objective as well. So is that something we can form in our next discussion?
And I will definitely defer to Janice on the legal side. But what I'm hoping is that we get a better understanding of what is our goal, and is it necessary to stop anything? Can we do things on a parallel path? That is, continue what we're doing, but also do the analysis, but also try to achieve again, if we can understand what the goal
Well,
is.
the goal is equity. And so to continue doing what has not been equitable seems not the wisest solution to me. When I ask in the last 5 years, has there been a Black developer? And the answer is no, literally zero. If we want to extend it out 10 years, I'll wait to hear what that number is. Was there
And
zero?
so is the goal to are we just talking about the goal of getting a Black developer? Or what are the goals?
Wondering, the goal is to understand why we have not.
Okay.
The goal is
that's a different question.
The goal isn't some, right-wing quota analysis. There must be something about the way we do things that is beneficial for some and not for others. I want to know what it is.
If we could,
and I want to know what we can do to improve it. See, my goal, and I don't speak for an entire body, I would like to see people of color developing, living in, becoming homeowners, and thriving in my hometown. And that is not the case today. I want to know why. I want to fix it. If it takes a minute to stop everything to get to a goal which we say we all seek, then so be it.
So just in all fairness, let's all remember, we got to get the data. We got to make sure. I understand it feels this way. I also think, we can come back and have a discussion. If the goal is to, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking about timeline. Let me back up, clear thought. So we don't do these every week. We don't do these every month. So, if we're going to collect some information, maybe we also collect how many we've done the last few years that informs whether or not we need to halt and consider a moratorium versus concurrently discuss, evaluate, because I don't see one queued up coming to us. I don't see one in the next few months unless we're not aware of it being queued up. So I don't think there's another Luigi Asker RFP out there for development that, we could work on this concurrently without interrupting something. Just a thought. Okay, so any other questions?
If Janice could answer the moratorium question that the Vice Mayor asked, that I would greatly appreciate that, Chairman.
Well, I have to think about the moratorium because that is usually related to zoning, and you're talking about a change in a housing policy. So when we use the term moratorium, it is still stopping doing anything, I guess, as far as granting any more of our housing trust funds. But that doesn't fall within the zoning. So I think it's a little bit different than the statutory moratorium requirements that were related to, as you said, Deborah, to when we were talking about stopping a particular kind of zoning use. So
that's great news then.
Well,
that means we don't have
but probably you still want to use that as the same framework. I would assume that it's still a big decision to just stop. And so I probably, even if statutorily you're not required to follow these certain requirements, it probably makes sense to still say, what is the data that shows we have an issue? Then you, as you say, what is the goal they're trying to find out? And then, of course, it can't be forever. So you set the time period where you try to do the research. This is how we did the hotels. You try to do the research to get the information to tell you.
And so how long did that take for the hotel? So we can have just an idea of how long a moratorium. So how long would it take to get the data? And how long would it take?
The hotel, we know, took more than a year, right, Deborah?
It had a 6-month extension.
And lots of stakeholder meetings. And so even on top of, besides just research, to get maybe this is start getting this anecdotal information. As in my review of your request, it might be difficult to get the data to the level that you want. So there may have to be a process of stakeholder meetings and what are people experiencing? What are they saying? How do we get to that? Maybe it is stakeholder developers. Why don't more developers, who's out there in this local community working anyway, and do they feel that they're not getting opportunities? Do we have to do wider, cast the net wider to more places to say, please come into this town to develop if they're not here and don't have the capacity already.
Yeah. So what if a developer could do like I proposed at 319 and say, I may not be able to get X number of units under 60%, but what I could do is sell some condos to people affected by urban renewal. I mean, that would be a trade-off that I would love. I just happen to know the Black community, part of the issue in renting is Black folks above a certain income much prefer home ownership. I mean, is that something we need to consider? Or is the goal just to literally be able to say we have X number of units of affordable housing? Affordable housing for whom? So again,
So I don't know if I answered Vice Mayor's question, but it is.
I like the direction you're going. I thank you for that information, and that's exact. But I think we're all getting kind of clogged up and caught up in the moratorium. But I think we start with collecting the data, and I believe that Bowen has done a lot of great work. He has the research infrastructure to call these stakeholders to the table and ask these questions that Councilwoman Mosley is asking. So we have a grounds for moving forward. Again, I think we get caught up in moratorium and it's kind of making us freeze in our thought process when what she is saying is, there are unintended consequences to a lot of policies that we have put in place, a lot of programs that we put in place. That's why we're having conversations right now about urban renewal and the effects of urban renewal. It started off as a great idea, a lot of stakeholders at the table, a lot of community engagement, and it was a disaster. So let's catch it early, answer the questions, get all the data so we know how to move forward. So don't get caught up in moratorium and what it takes to do a moratorium and stop doing something good that's producing all of that. Let's just get the data so we won't be back here 20 years from now saying, I told you so.
I can appreciate that. I appreciate that summary. It's helpful. Thank you both. I think great topic. Certainly of interest in the community, and the more we can glean, the better we can do. So I love that we can start by trying to get some data. We're lucky to have Patrick Bowen. I'm trying to think, the last time we did an update, we at AHAC had asked him to add some more multifamily data, like bedrooms and stuff, and he was able to add a layer. So hopefully this is just something he can talk to. I've been talking about some housing inventory things with him, and he has a very curious brain about our inventory. So this may actually intrigue him. So, all right, great discussion. I think are we wrapping that one up? Do we have any other things on Paul's updates and questions for him while we have him? I just had a couple. I was curious about what you said about Oak Hill, that there was some movement.
Just that we've been getting developer interest from Oak Hill site. So I've been getting, some more calls there. And then, quick, another solution, Councilwoman Mosley, and I'm sorry if I keep being like, hey, we've thought of things, but it is on our list to do like when I started, a regional tour of developers. It's on the list to do a regional tour of Black and Brown developers in like a 4 hour or 6 mile radius to attract work in Asheville. Our MO was City of Asheville is open for business, and we're open for the business of affordable housing, and open for business of developers of all types will hopefully be the additional sentence. So something the team's looking at to do in the spring.
Paul, can I say something right there? That's so important to do and be intentional with our outreach, because anytime I'm out of town and I say I'm from Asheville and people say, are there Black people there? Is there a Black community there? So they don't really know enough about Asheville for Asheville to be on their radar. But as we cast the net and we're very intentional about our narrative and what's needed in the history of housing, then I think we can draw more people. They're not that far off.
And just so folks know, I love the idea. And just so folks know, so now every time I see a developer or even a nonprofit developer, I'm going to be very specific in asking, what are your marketing plans? What is your outreach? What subcontractors do you plan on engaging? So that's going to be a question every single time, including this meeting, I believe. So it's very, very important to me because we have to be intentional. And I don't believe we are intentional, at least at this point. I do have a question, Paul, totally not really related to this, and I meant to ask it before. Can you give me an update on what's going on out by Pisgah View with the Housing Authority and that? Not Pisgah View,
Beaverview?
Mm-hmm.
Purpose built.
I might pivot to Nikki on that one for maybe the latest, greatest update there.
Sure thing, Paul. We've been working with the Housing Authority to understand the future of the partnership there, and working on a draft memorandum of understanding that would be brought before council. So we continue to work with our legal partners on just getting that agreement ready for committee review and then ultimately council review. So that's in the works, hoping to have something early next year, I think would be ideal.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, just a couple more things I wanted to highlight from the updates. I did see that solar was added to 360 Hilliard, which looks great, and I was thrilled to see they chose a local small solar contractor. Shout out to Soul Farm on that one. I did see you also had the ARPA coordinator mentions that the $4.7 million that will be coming from ARPA to the Housing Consortium will be reaching out to hire a coordinator position. So just a little plug there. And for those of you listening at home, we're trying, we do have another $4.7 million coming from the rescue plan, and the Housing Consortium will be taking up that process of applications. Roughly that timeline will start in of January 2022. And with applications roughly coming in the spring and allocation roughly in November. So those of you with organizations looking for that information, you can reach out to Paul, Nikki, myself for additional detail. Just trying to plug that timeline in as many meetings as possible.
Do you have an equity plan for the distribution of those funds?
I think that is something that we haven't actually started those meetings, but there is actually community input and stuff being queued up. So I think that will be an important discussion as we proceed. Yes.
It seems that we need to lead into designing some type of equity standard, Councilwoman Mosley, when it comes to housing development or the distribution of funds.
Could be interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting.
Would be great to do during a moratorium.
Okay, so we have one last update that I wanted to hand the mic to Nikki to make.
Sure thing.
On his updates.
I'll do that. And so we have another community development update to share, and it's regarding staffing. And so it's with a deep heart full of gratitude for Paul D'Angelo. Paul's had the opportunity to accept another position to lead an affordable housing developer in Colorado. We're very happy for Paul. This is an amazing opportunity for him. And of course, acknowledging the great work and great impact that he's had here in our community. We can only expect that he would be tapped to really lead the charge in another community, to really broaden his impact in another space. So as much as it pains me to lose someone like Paul, who's been, first off, an amazing partner for me personally in my work here at the city. I was reflecting this morning that really my love for this work really began when Paul and I really became in deep partnership together on how to work on affordable housing for the city of Asheville. So I have a deep sense of gratitude just to share for that personally. But I just appreciate everything that Paul has done for our community. He's an amazing leader. He's led the community development division since 2019. And I know that his staff really appreciates his leadership and his sense of humor, his joy that he brings to the work. And so we're just really, really happy that Paul has this opportunity, but also to acknowledge that he will be greatly missed by our community. So thanks, Paul, for all your work. Thanks for really bringing affordable housing in your voice, and thanks for being my co-anchor for so many amazing work sessions that we've had with our council members. And so I know this committee really, really understands the depth and breadth of Paul's expertise and his hard work. So I thought it was only fitting to really make this announcement here today. So Paul's last day will be next week. He'll be out after Thanksgiving, and we're working on our transition plan. But really, we just want to take a moment to tell Paul thank you.
Oh yeah, I knew it was coming, and it doesn't make it any easier. I have grown to really appreciate you, Paul. I was thinking back when I got involved in affordable housing. I think I've been with 4 or 5 directors in that department at this point. You by far were the most consistent, available, appreciated, knowledgeable. It's been tremendous working with you, and this is definitely a loss for the city. So if it doesn't work out, come on back. But really, I think, as you can see by the updates, we have launched more projects under your watch. We have accomplished more things under your watch. We have updated policy after policy after policy. Even in this discussion we had in the last 20 minutes, I mean, your diplomacy and your knowledge and ability to see a path forward is always appreciated, and it's just a big loss. So thank you for all you have done, Paul.
Well, thank you all very much. That's beyond sweet, and I'm very grateful. And then one quick thing is, please know that these conversations that happen, and I tell Nikki this all the time, it's so important, the good, the bad, the ugly conversations that happen early and often with all sorts of stakeholders. Everyone knows I can talk, and I enjoy those opportunities, but I also know that listening and opening up your ears to the conversation that just occurred, to make sure that we're doing right by the community and that we're doing better and thinking about things is just as important. When somebody's like, great job, this is perfect. It's just important to be at the table for those tough conversations that need to happen for the benefit of our community and the benefit for affordable housing. So they can be tough, but I'm forever grateful for them. And I look forward to learning from them. And yes, Sage, like I texted you, just think like a college student going off for a year. We'll see how I do. If it doesn't work out, I'll come knocking on 70 Court Plaza and see how that goes. But I'm grateful. You all gave me a lot of carte blanche here, and I hope I've done you all some service. It might not have been everything, but I hope it sure was something. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Moving on in our agenda, y'all. So for those of you listening at home, we are now moving on to item 3, the Strategic Partnership Funds, known as SPF. We have an update. And I guess, Paul, are you going to kick this off?
Yeah, so talking about more fun conversations. So strategic partnership funds, as most of you know, this has been out there for a couple years now in deciding on how we can strategically use this funding source. And if y'all remember, it was probably about a year ago that there were a couple decisions made with strategic partnership funds, which had to do with the direction of those funds. So it was agreed upon that we would use these funds for closing the opportunity gap, that we had about $400,000, give or take, and that we should do grants at a minimum of $25,000. And then other things that I think were kind of still on the table, and additional questions that not only came up then about who had the capacity to run these funds, particularly with community development not being education experts per se. And so we wanted to bring this back. This is kind of the full memo that went out about a year ago, and we're looking forward to the discussion this morning. Also, my partner here, Alex Mitchner, our Kayla lead and workforce development coordinator, is here. I think one thing that the community development team wanted to discuss was, not only, moving forward, and we have a recommendation in the staff report about possibly doing an RFP, but hopefully what comes around to today's discussion is how can this funding be strategic? How can this funding be used to be really strategic about closing the opportunity gap? There were some additional comments that are in that staff report that talk about some things to think about. Should education experts, equity coaches seem to be the one thing that folks really agreed upon when we worked with the schools and the equity department at the time. And potential partners that could possibly be out there. And then are there any programs we could mirror that are out there to do that work and maybe hire somebody? There's a link to a program that I learned about in Boulder, Hint Hint. And it talks about a child program there that the teachers and folks actually go into the kids' homes, and the housing aspect of it and the education aspect of it. So a lot of information is in the staff report, a lot of years and good work behind it. It's difficult to open this up to a larger discussion, but both Alex and I think, agree, and the team, that it's probably worth the discussion today to really, and it might not get solved today, but how can we strategically use these funds for our community and closing the opportunity gap? And happy to answer any questions or help lead a discussion, or Alex and I can certainly share our experience in this process over the last couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Questions and comments for Paul?
I would just like to say I like the direction that we're going in getting a team of educators. But when I think about the opportunity gap, I understand that there are needs outside of academics. And we're really wrapping support around a child's family. And I think the best person or expertise to give us a clear snapshot of what a child's experience would be is not only the educator, but also a social worker. And there are social workers in every school, and there are social workers per district that I believe can get us a clearer shot so that we can formulate our RFP from the highest priority needs of a family. And I believe that some nonprofits might have that information as well. I'm thinking about Children's First. Children First? Yeah, if that's correct. And I know they specify in a lot of different areas, from after school programming to youth mentorship. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they also look into the McKinney-Vento students as well. So that kind of brings in homelessness, academics, and family needs as well. But I want to massage that idea from that perspective. I do believe that a child's education doesn't always rise and fall on their intelligence, but that holistic approach that we've been having discussions about yeah, and I think we have a lot of great social workers who would be able to be a part of that discussion.
Thank you. I can appreciate that. I know, yeah, the entire picture is crucial here. Housing, access, food, transportation, all of it. So, yeah, okay. I appreciate the direction this is going to. Any other questions or comments, concerns about next steps while we have staff here? Because we have a potential motion and a recommendation to council here. Are we all able to read through that? And
I'm going to get clear a little bit. I want to get clear on it. So we're saying that we don't have the staff capacity right now to handle the reporting and all that entails with holding up a program.
And I heard capacity and expertise.
Capacity and expertise. So we're asking a community organization to kind of take on the lift.
That's what we would put out in a request for proposal to find a partner to possibly handle that. But again, thinking, creatively a bit, like, could it be, somebody that could be hired to lead this charge? Could it be, I don't want to speak too freely here, but a budget line item that goes to an agency that's the proven expert in this work? Or do we develop an RFP, bring it back to the committee to kind of talk about with what they want to see with these fundings? Again, I think, and Alex has her hand up, I think in Alex and I's really great discussions, it's like strategic partnership funds, strategic closing the opportunity gap. We want to make sure that moves forward and that they for the use of the funds, which wasn't always the case in the past.
And one thing I'd just like to emphasize on that whatever organization we end up moving forward with, that an equity lens is going to be used. And that's something that we just really need to go by. About this time last month, I had kind of like a forum with my Kayla students to get feedback on things going on in their schools. The feedback is very concerning. There are a lot of racial issues going on in their schools. And when I think about the opportunity gap, I'm like, well, it doesn't sound like there's a conducive learning environment. What do you expect to happen at the end of the day when these kind of issues are plaguing their academic system? And I really like the idea of having equity coaches. I know that that's something that Asheville City Schools had in place before, but if we do follow through with something like that, the equity coaches need to be required. It's not something, if equity is going to be our priority, it needs to be prioritized, and people need to be held accountable at the end of the day. When they've had these type of equity coaches in the schools before, it was something that was kind of optional that teachers could opt out of, and eventually it went away. So I'm just saying, like, that needs to be our number one concern, just because our kids are going through it at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Alex.
Yeah, I would like to see maybe the award being given not to a single entity. Maybe if they can form a coalition and the nonprofit can just, maybe one single nonprofit can be the lead on the RFP. And I think because that builds in accountability. And then that also builds in a lot of unification that needs to happen across the city, across agencies, across organizations, and that's needed. So instead of just like one nonprofit taking the entire lift, I would like to see them formulate some type of coalition and apply.
Great thought.
So would the recommendation be to develop a draft RFP and bring it back to, HCD and make sure we're incorporating some of these elements before we cast a net?
Can you do that by next Wednesday, Paul? But yeah, what I'm hearing.
I would like that because it seems like this has been prolonged, and our children's education, it doesn't wait. We've had graduating classes go by without having this support in place. But I would like to take a look at it because I think in recent discussions, we've been saying that a lot of, our RFP process might need a little more council attention than normal. Not to overreach, but just a little more attention. And
yeah, I agree, because, if we're the ones ultimately looking at the outcomes of the
Mention in
RFP.
the
Oh. I'm not sure if I had a delay or if you all did. I'm sorry if I interrupted someone. I was just going to say, I agree. A little bit of input on the front of the RFP may help resolve some of the issues we have when the proposals come back. I like that thinking. So what I'm hearing is bring an RFP draft back to this committee for starters, and that there is support for moving forward to kind of outsource partner, et cetera, on this item, and that the expediency is important because we have already delayed a year and doubled the funding, but meanwhile, kids are still growing and graduating and need our help. So I think, do we have clarity on that? So I don't think we're gonna, I guess we could do a motion just to bring back a draft RFP. I'm not sure you'd need that though. Yeah, so just bring back
it's more of an action. Yeah.
action item. Okay, great, everyone. Anything else on the SPF RFP process?
I personally just want to thank my work with Alex on this. It's been really strong work, and appreciate her voice at the table on this to remind us of what's happening in the schools and, the strategy of these funds. So thanks, Alex, very much for your work.
Thank you, Alex.
So I'm sorry. So Alex, I love what you said about equity coaches. So would we task this person with designing that program?
I think so. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what it would look like exactly if we ended up maybe using that funding for that organization to maybe hire those equity coaches. Maybe I'm not sure how that would work off the top of my head, but
okay.
I just know that I'll give you some background. I'm born and raised from here. I'm a teacher's kid. I've worked in the school system, and there are so many barriers that are not in the public eye that hold so many students back, and it's not necessarily things that are like in your face racism, but a lot of stuff that's undercover. How certain students will be allowed to take certain like math classes that are going to benefit them in the long run to take more APs. So ultimately they're going to get into a better college than the students that are not allowed to take those classes. And it strategically puts them ahead at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, I just really want somebody with that lens that's really going to see up close the barriers that a lot of our students are facing.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. Okay. I think that concludes item number 3 for those of you listening at home. We're going to move on to item number 4, another big discussion item, Homeward Bound. And is Mary Brooke or Paul going to lead on this?
This will be myself, and let me pull up this staff report quickly, and I'll be right there. Looks like they're trying to shut off my computer already, but I'll be right with you as I bring up this report.
We know that Homeward Bound is proposing a permanent.
I got it.
Okay.
So this is here today about Homeward Bound's $1.5 million rehab for permanent supportive housing. And community development staff recommends approving Homeward Bound's request for $1.5 million housing trust fund forgivable loan, forgivable at the end of a period of 99 years and secured with a deed of trust for the purpose of property rehabilitation. As many of you know, the city committed $2 million in ARPA funding this past summer for the acquisition of the Days Inn at 201 Tunnel Road. Acquisition price was $6.5 million, and the city contributed $2 million in ARPA funds to help with that acquisition. The motel sits on approximately 3 acres and contains 128 guest rooms, 2-story buildings, 2 separate buildings, and Homeward Bound's looking to convert these 85 of the 128 rooms into permanent supportive housing by adding a kitchenette and making those a livable environment and studio apartments. The remaining rooms will be converted to office space. For case managers, it's our understanding that Homeward Bound is going to use move their headquarters to this space. A phase 1 environmental review and an assessment has been conducted. Project will have project-based vouchers from the Housing Authority to assist with their operating costs and reserves once they get through the acquisition, which is done, and then the repurpose of the building. Housing units are targeted to our special needs population, and the critical strategy in ending chronic homelessness is a key component of continuum of care, providing an exit from homelessness from people with the most complex needs, with housing being the solution for homelessness. Project will be affordable in perpetuity with a deed reflecting this agreement. Homeward Bound anticipates the property will open in January 1 of 2023 with 85 residents. The total project cost comes in at about $13.6 million, with $7.1 associated with this repurpose and rehab. And that is the Homeward Bound's request to help with $1.5 million request for that $7.1 million for repurposing this site. Overall, the price comes in at about $160,000 per unit for this site. Right now, I would say construction costs for new construction probably come in at about $185,000, give or take. They've partnered with McKibben Places, who've done a work in the Charlotte area to develop hotel conversions. And we've broken down the Homeward Bound funding requests from other agencies and work, as well as a little bit of information about their annual operating costs and annual revenues, being assisted there with project-based vouchers. This meets several council goals, and at committee here for the first time, I do want to take just another minute or two for the pros and cons here. Funding supports 85 permanent supportive housing units, very important there. Proposed project will end homelessness for at least 85 people experiencing chronic homelessness, which aligns with our consolidated plan. Cost per unit. The proposed $1.5 million housing trust fund for rehab comes in at about $17,600, which is below our average. When you combine the housing trust fund investment and ARPA funding, if awarded, that was $2.5 million. That came in at $29,412. Overall, between both sources of funding for acquisition and rehab, that would come in at a total investment cost of $4.5 million and a per unit cost of $52,000, which is below the $80,000 mark, but a bit higher than our average subsidy that's gone into projects over the last couple of years, if you're looking at the overall sources there. Permanent supportive housing can save a jurisdiction or municipality anywhere from $17,000 to $37,000 per person. Homeward Bound will submit all homeless data from permanent supportive housing into our HMIS system to collect client-level data and data on the provision of housing and services for homeless individuals and families and persons at risk. This is important to have that data collection at HMIS. And Homeward Bound will comply with the city's business inclusion policy, which requires demonstration of best faith efforts to meet certain percentage of MWBE participation. Some quick cons here as well. Per the Housing Trust Fund policy, the maximum loan amount available to each developer is $20,000 per unit, and the maximum loan per project is $1 million unless otherwise approved by City Council due to unique features. Per our trust fund policy as well, trust fund is not to be used for grants, forgivable loans, or indefinitely deferred loans. This loan would be against that policy, but I believe can be decided on by City Council. If this funding is granted, this would set a precedent for future housing trust fund loans until the policy can be updated. Perhaps that grants are given at certain criteria, like a full 100% homeless population or something like that for the future. City's overall investment in this project is $4.5 million versus the county's investment of $3 million. And while community development respects and supports the team at Homeward Bound, there have been concerns with staffing changes to Homeward Bound that may make this project risky from an underwriting perspective. The project manager listed is no longer a part of the team. The financial manager started in September. Please note that the new project manager for the renovation has been with Homeward Bound for 3 years and previous construction and rehabilitation experience. And with that said, a lot of information here to absorb. I'm happy to answer any questions. A couple of quick notes, kind of going back to conversation that happened earlier. You may see more of our staff reports contain language about reporting like HMIS or our business inclusion policies so that we can be really clear on the front end about that. And the importance of our staff reports to be as transparent as possible with conversations happening in the community about projects, et cetera. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Fellow councilwomen? questions, comments?
I can't see everyone on the screen. Is anyone from Homeward Bound here?
Yes, we've got interim director Cindy McMahon on the call with a few of her staff folks as well. I believe Jenny Moffitt and is it Jim as well?
Yeah, those of you with Homeward Bound, if you want to go ahead and activate your cameras and say something real quick, it'll cue you up to be in our little Brady Brunch. There we go. We've got Jim, Cindy, and Jenny.
Yes, hello. I'm Cindy McMahon, the interim executive director of Homeward Bound, and we are happy to be here with you. Jenny and Jim also are here. We have some echoing, I think. That was probably because of Jenny. So Jenny is our permanent supportive housing director, and Jim is in charge of lead gifts with Homeward Bound, and so very involved in the capital campaign. And we're happy to answer whatever questions you may have of us.
Good to see you, Cindy. Hope you're doing well. Since you've had an opportunity to do the point in time calculation, were you able to determine of those who are unhoused, how many are native or local to Asheville?
So since Jenny is our program expert on this, I'm going to defer that question to her.
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry. We're having a hard time hearing each other in here.
Sure. Hello, Jenny. Since you've had the opportunity to do the point in time calculation, I'm wondering if you were able to determine how many folks were native or local to Asheville.
Okay.
And what percentage, the number and the percentage, either way.
Sure. I will be honest and say I don't actually know. I don't have the point in time count information in front of me, but can quickly look that up, or Paul or someone from the city may know, since that's their project that they manage.
And while you're looking that up, can you also give me the demographic breakup, like what percentage are people of color to in light of the point in time?
Sure.
We can take a look on that at our side, but Jenny, if you're on it, just let us know from the last HMIS.
I pulled it up. So it looks like there's 2019 and 2020 numbers. Are there 2021 already? And it's just not up on the page?
Emily Ball's on the call. Emily, I know we're going to do the point in time towards the end of January. Is that considered data from 2021, I'm assuming? Or am I wrong there? And Emily might be on a call or something, so we can find that out. But the next point in time will happen in January towards the end of the month.
Can you give me an idea?
This is Emily. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Emily, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thanks,
Okay.
Emily.
I'm sorry, I'm having some tech trouble, and so I'm just on my phone. We do not, in the point in time, we don't capture information about where people are from originally. Jenny, I think probably the best data set for that is your AHOPE data that y'all have been using in your capital campaign. If you want to share that information, that's a good snapshot of our unsheltered population in terms of sort of community of origin. The demographic data for our 2021 point in time count, we had, I'm doing this from memory, but we can send this to you. 24% of folks in the point in time count were Black or African American, and another 6% were other people of color. 70% were white. I don't have those exact numbers in front of me, but 527 was our total population count in 2021.
And Emily,
Okay,
that goes with my memory of 30% Black and brown, I think, that goes with my memory as well. Thanks. Sorry, Councilwoman Mosley.
No. That's interesting and quite helpful. So let's go ahead and assume it's 24%, and then recognizing that the African-American population of the city is what now, around 9%? Can someone give me an idea of your equity plan for deciding who gets to live in the permanent housing? What is your plan for that?
we will, as with all of our permanent supportive housing units that Homeward Bound works with, they will go through our city's continuum of care coordinated entry system. And so in that system, we're looking at the folks in our community who have been homeless the longest, so chronicity, and as well as vulnerability. And currently, our community, under Emily's lead, actually, we're looking for a new tool to use. The current tool that the city and most communities have used is no longer being recommended because of racial and gender inequities. So the city, along with providers like Homeward Bound, Sunrise, Elida Homes, many others, are working on trying to find and create a new tool that will have a better lens around racial equity and also around gender equity. Right now, about 40% of our clients that come through our Homeless Day Center are people of color. And so it will really be at that point, who are the folks in our community who are the most vulnerable, who have been experiencing homelessness the longest, that would project them moving into the units here at the 201 Tunnel Road site.
What lessons did you learn from the equity tool that you said, or whatever you were doing before, that we decided wasn't working? What wasn't working?
It was a national tool that was created by OrdCode out of Canada, but most communities, most COCs used it as best practice. But over the past 4 or 5 years, it became really clear that it was not intentionally, but also not looking at racial equity through the same lens that maybe we were looking at mental health, we were looking at substance use, looking at physical health. And so we wanted to be sure that we could find a tool. And again, the city and Emily's office there at the COC is working on creating that tool or finding that tool. We're sort of in the beginning phases of that and have a plan for the next 12 months to have meetings with local providers and so forth for us to create that tool together with input from all of the folks that use the tool and how we slate for housing in our community.
I'll share one other thought as far as gathering information on locals. I know when we were talking about encampments and relocating folks to hotels, that we were asking that information. Were you from here? Were you from a neighboring region? So there may be some data around the Ramada guests or Red Roof guests, but it wouldn't be encompassing of all folks, but there is that.
I can share that also, if that's okay. For folks at the Ramada, 76% of people who are there had housing in Buncombe County and became homeless in Buncombe County. And then another 12% became homeless elsewhere in Western North Carolina. I want to say 2%, elsewhere in Western North Carolina, and another 2% elsewhere in North Carolina. And then the remainder were from other communities across the country.
Emily, when you all do that, do you also collect information about the life situation that changed that left them homeless? Just curious.
We don't. It's not part of the HUD required intake into the homeless management information system. We do in that intake collect information about disabilities, so including substance use and mental health. We collect information about income and health insurance and some other conditions, family composition, of course, demographics, but not the presenting reason.
Are we allowed to ask that? Is there a reason we don't? I mean, I just wonder, evictions, job loss. I wonder if we might better understand if we knew.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. We don't have the ability to modify that within the system, but we certainly can supplement that on a kind of parallel track.
I'll be curious. Okay, any other questions for Homeward Bound while we have them?
I kind of do. So, the policy for Housing Trust Fund dollars is for a loan, not a grant. You're seeking a grant. And I guess I understand why you would seek a grant. If a grant were denied, would you still be willing to take a loan?
Our understanding is this is a 99-year forgivable loan that we are requesting. So might want to ask Paul to clarify that a little bit, but it is a loan that we're requesting, the 99-year forgivable loan. If you're asking whether we would consider a loan that is not forgivable, that's something that we would need to go back and look at our financial calculations around that and make sure that we would have the financial wherewithal to be able to pay that back in a timely way, obviously. But Paul, if you want to speak to this question of grant versus loan, perhaps that would be helpful.
Sure, and I may pivot to Janice for the exact language, but yeah, this will be an amount of funding that sits out there on a deed of trust that if anything changes regarding this property, the intended use, etc., then we would have a deed of trust where we could get the funding back. And it's kind of like in a way a forgivable loan, but 99 years. Janice might have the exact language there, but it is something that's going to sit out there on the property under a deed of trust. Janice?
And what makes this different than our typical model? If you can explain that to me and why we made the decision to not do this the way we typically do.
Sure. So normally with a housing trust fund loan, we can see a lot of different scenarios. The most popular seems to be, and generalizing here, like a 20-year loan with no payments, or maybe it's interest-only payments annually, and then a balloon payment at the end of 20 years. Or some type of interest in principal, and then a balloon payment at 20 years. But that seems to be popular, and like a 1 or 2% interest rate. Knowing that in some of our home funding discussions, this HUD home funding, this has come up, and knowing the subsidy needed to house our chronically homeless and most vulnerable population, we know that comes at a higher cost. And I believe Homeward Bound's narrative was to get the funding for acquisition and rehab repurpose, get that covered between city, county, Dogwood, and their own raising of funds. And then the operating costs would be covered through project-based vouchers to keep them afloat for years on out, was the general thing. Again, it is not in the policy. We thought this was worth considering for the need for housing and permanent supportive housing.
Paul and perhaps Deborah, since this is the first time we've really embarked on this kind of adventure, I'm curious procedurally. So we did the $2 million for the purchase. This is $1.5 million for upfit. In the chart, I see there's another $1 million ask for ARPA. So that's a $4.5 million ask of the city total. So a third of the project. And then I see that there's an ask of the county for ARPA. And I guess I had thought there was a Dogwood Housing Trust or Dogwood Trust application as well. But my procedural question is, if we agreed to this today, is it contingent upon the other partners also engaging? Because it seems like, without everyone, the project may not happen. And my other question is for perhaps Homeward Bound on where is Dogwood a partner in this project? And if so, how and where?
Let me just briefly respond to that. We've basically raised about half of the renovation money, and that comes from an additional $1 million from Buncombe County. They've already put that in. And then we've also done some private fundraising from individuals to get us to about halfway to the renovation goal. We do have several proposals. One that's into Dogwood Health Trust. It's actually for operations, in addition to the $2 million that they put in for the acquisition. And we're looking at preparing another proposal to help with the renovations as well.
So Dogwood put in $2 million for the acquisition. City
Correct.
put in $2 million for the acquisition. County put in $2 million for the acquisition. Okay. And then the county also put in $1 million for upfit. And then
Correct.
this is a $1.5 million upfit from the city request. And then no more, the operational, you also had a request to Dogwood for operational expenses? That's it.
We do. I don't have that right in front of me, but I know we were looking at support for our operations. Actually, for not only just for the 201 Tunnel Road property, but also for our permanent supportive housing program in general. The Dogwood proposal.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay. Homeward Bound folks, have you all, I'm just curious, I know I've been talking with you all, privately even for a long time on this project. With all of the room numbers and relocating the offices there and all of the wraparound services and stuff, can anyone speak to how 85 rooms was chosen? I'm just curious, did you look at more, or was 85 really the cap after you balanced out office space needs and so on?
Sure. I'm going to ask Jim to mute himself just so that we don't run into problems there. I think Jenny can speak to this. This is really, I think, going on other models that we've seen in other places and best practices and what they have seen in terms of kind of what are the thresholds for a successful project of this kind. But I'm going to let Jenny speak to that as the expert.
Sure. Exactly what Cindy said. We did some research with other communities that have done similar permanent supportive housing program projects, and particularly the projects in Charlotte, Moore Place, which is run by Roof Above. And that number 85 in the 80 to 90 range seemed to be the really sweet spot for both it being a really positive experience for residents and being a number of highly vulnerable people all in one location that staff are able to offer the support that they need to continue to have a safe environment and an environment where folks are able to really flourish. So we looked at higher numbers and our board and staff, just based on our experience the past 5 years as well with the Woodfin project that we've been running, which is very similar to what Home is Key will be. 85 is where we landed as a number that meets a significant need in the community, but also will be a manageable number of units for us staffing wise. We did leave the door open that in the future we could even some of the space that is becoming office space, as those are being renovated, a lot of the infrastructure in those rooms will be left, like plumbing, electrical, so that down the road, if we did get to a point where it made sense to increase that number, we'd be able to do that pretty easily. But for this time, 85 made the most sense based on just the information we've been able to gather from other providers.
Thank you.
So I'll just add to that. Also, that in addition to the staff office spaces that will be in the building, there will also be clinical space and other space where our community partners can come in to offer wraparound services, additional services to what Homeward Bound offers to our clients. And that's built into the plans as well.
Yes, there'll be
services, like we'll have a medical clinic here on site. We'll have a peer living room here on site, as well as opportunities for us to bring in mental health providers and some space for organizations like MANA to offer food assistance. So we really want to create and leave some space available for other providers to be able to come in and also meet the needs of folks in the community.
Paul, what'll be left in that, the fund after this?
I just had that open. It looked like a 1.4.
Will remain after?
That includes leaving in the Pine View and other condo project. It's in our, in fact, I really wish I had called this out during our community updates. The new spreadsheet for Housing Trust Fund looks great and is much easier to read. And if you all find that, so it says it looks like fiscal year 2022 estimated Housing Trust Fund will be 2.8 million. That includes the $1 million for Bowcatcher Vistas and Pine View, 1.2 million in it. So this would be a 1.5 million ask from our 2.9 million or $8 million projected balance.
When you're talking about Buena Vista and Pine View, those are the two return funds, right?
Well, they haven't been technically.
Yeah, about 3.
Right. There are one group is trying to reassemble, so I don't think they officially returned yet, but that could happen. Yes.
So I'll go ahead and say I have like concern about changing the policy. I love the work. I appreciate the work. Again, 99 years is giving me concern. It's making me wonder under what other circumstances do we afford organizations the same opportunity? And are we setting ourselves up?
Councilwoman Mosley, I brought this up too in discussion, I think, with city staff, wondering procedurally. So there's a couple options I see, because council by vote moves money in and out of the Housing Trust Fund. And, you know, so it seems like there's a path. I don't know that this is the best path, but just to put everything on the table, council could vote to reduce the balance in the Housing Trust Fund and to reallocate it for this homeless project, you know, permanent support of homelessness. But I agree with you. There's a little concern about doing something that's not currently in the policy, because like in AHAC, your group, we always talked about, you know, this is supposed to be a replenishing fund balance. So when you do 0% interest, you're not actually growing it. And when you give it away, you're definitely declining it. And it's supposed to be a growing fund to continue the building and, you know, subsidizing of affordability.
Especially since we had contributions before, you know, because we're going to be what, 4.5 mil?
We'd be the highest in.
And just for a little bit of clarity around the trust fund, back to that point, like right now, if those two partnerships don't work out, we would have about 4.5 million in Housing Trust Fund. And but we are trying to work with those partners to see what we can do there. There should be more coming soon on that. And yes, there could be by veering off policy, it does potentially set a precedent. I don't know if somewhere in the motion, if this was agreed upon, that, you know, the special circumstance, and that might be a Janice question, that because it's a 100% targeting homelessness, that's why this was considered, which would set up a policy change, I believe, in the future, whether that would be changed. Not exactly sure legally if that's the way to do it, if y'all decided. But that was just a thought that we had at on staff level.
It does seem like those two could concur. Like if it comes to council, perhaps that policy language suggestion could also be in place by then.
So are we saying if MHO comes with 100% affordable, it's the same possible?
Permanent supportive homelessness housing?
Oh, well, you said 100% affordable.
Oh. Well, I think
I'm sorry, I meant 100% for homeless housing. Is that the bar that you start at, that then that the grant is an opportunity there, or this forgivable 99-year loan. Like, where is that when the tipping point to consider that the funding payback is a bit different than what the policy states itself?
Homeward Bound folks, is there I know with the $2 million that we did for acquisition, there was a timeline that was pressing. Is there a pressing timeline on this month and this decision?
That is a very good question. I think I can let Jim answer the question in terms of the timeline for fundraising. We are in the quiet phase of the campaign and moving into the final months of that process. And so that's part of the timeliness of this. But Jim, if you want to speak to that more fully, we do expect to start the renovation process in early 2022. And so want to have as many of the funds in place as we can when that goes forward, so that we're in a good position with the GC.
Okay. So it does sound like this, if we didn't make a move on this today, it would be okay, because we only have one council meeting in December anyways. So we're getting to January, we have 2 meetings. So we could actually continue this if there needs to be more discussion around the policy, etc.
Jim may also be able to answer more about the timeliness of this question.
Okay. Yes, and I think that would be fine for us. We're trying to wrap up the quiet phase, which is the larger gifts, to make this all work by the end of January, so that we can go into what's called the public campaign. But that's more widespread support, but it's also contributions of $25 and $100 and that sort of thing. And so you don't really you don't get as much for your work. And certainly the amount there would probably be under $1 million. We'd like to be pretty close to our goal by the end of January, and that coincides also, I think, with construction, which I think is currently set to begin in early to mid-March.
Oh wow, that's great news. And I hope
that's correct, Cindy, right?
Early March is when I would say break ground, but since it's more renovation, early March is when we plan to get started.
That's terrific. So I wonder if that buys us a little time to address policy and get closer to the ARPA.
How did you all come up with?
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry, it's a delay. You can go and ask your question. You had it.
I don't know if it's my delay. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting people. I have a little delay. I was just going to say that buys us a little time to discuss policy change potential and to get us closer to the ARPA award and to know if those grants requests are possibly in line with the county too.
And also formulate an equity plan. I know you're in the process of working on it, but I would love a more finalized version if possible.
How did you come up with your number cost per unit? It seems a little high for a rehabilitation project.
We did hear recently that the average in another city was 50 per unit. And this is, I don't know the size of these hotel rooms. If someone could speak to that, I'm guessing they're about 400 square feet, 20 by 20, which would put this at a 400 square foot per foot cost.
So if that's a staff question regarding 7.1 million for 85 units comes in, at 83,500 a unit. But what has to be remembered is there's 128 rooms there, and they're also doing rehab for office space and all of that other as a part of this rehab as they move their offices to that site. So you could separate out the costs there. But overall, if it's a $7.1 million rehab repurpose, and you're strictly looking at the 85 units, again, this is a bit of a not quite apples to oranges here, that comes in at $83,500 per unit. But again, there's also other aspects of what they're doing with this building that are outside of the permanent supportive housing units.
Plus the purchase price, that's just up the.
The cost for $50,000 per hotel unit is just rehab. FYI, that price that you mentioned wasn't a purchase in rehab. That 50,000 average is just for rehab in other data that we've looked at with like Charlotte hotels, et cetera. And I think that's maybe a closer to like 55, Sage, for what it's worth.
That's great. That's cool.
And Chairperson, if you don't mind, I would love if you all would consider deferring so that staff can come back and respond to the question that Ms. Mosley posed in terms of policy and if we're going to recommend a policy change or differentiate between, those developers that are doing deeply affordable, which I think is essentially what this proposal is recommending. So if you all don't mind, we would love to come back with additional information, even though it won't be Paul delivering the message, and we definitely will miss that.
I think it sounds like that's where we're headed. It sounds like several requests. So both additional information on equity and selection of tenants. We wanted requests around policy change. There was a third one. Maybe I'm forgetting. Oh, just to align with ARPA and other asks. So I don't think I got a response to the question of when we do these deals as a city, do we make it contingent upon the other partnerships?
That is not something that is in the policy, and maybe that is something else to discuss in the aspect of, I think a lot of times folks come to the city and kind of want the city to move first on funding, which helps a domino effect with the other funding. And so that isn't in the policy, and I don't know if that's another part of the discussion. I know for the acquisition, the county put in $2 million, Dogwood put in $2 million. For this rehab repurpose, it looks like $1 million from the county, nothing from Dogwood on the repurpose of the building. But certainly that could be a part of the discussion. Historically, it seems, especially over the last year, where's the city first seems to be always the question that city management has to deal with right away.
The city first is always hard. Just in development in general, we just don't want to be the funder on the line and they can't get to a CO. So ensuring that all the funding is needed and that our investment will land them with an operable project is where I'm coming from. But it sounds like there's some due diligence and questions to be asked, and that we're going to continue this item to our next HCD meeting, which would be in January. And I'm sorry, will we have one in December? I think it might be canceled due to holiday. Let me just check.
That is on the discussion for when we get done our staff reports yep.
Okay. So it may be December and it may be January, which could have an impact on Homeward Bound's planning. I didn't see that on the agenda to discuss. Oh, next meeting. Okay, well, how about we just hammer that out real quick? Are we going to try and meet on December 21st? Because it impacts this discussion, I think.
So we have reached out to boards and commissions to see if there was potentially another date. And I believe also Bryson Shook, who is our staff representative here for this meeting, have talked about looking at potentially another different date, but we're not sure the will of the HCD council members.
Okay, so we could leave it like that if it becomes an important thing that we can do it, we can reschedule a meeting if we have to remove it from the week of Christmas. Okay, I don't think we need a motion to continue this. I think we're just giving you some action statements there, Homeward Bound, to come back and for staff to discuss and come back to us with some ideas around policy or not policy. Okay?
And I would add to that discussion, if you all can come back with, just give me some type of idea about your operations, because you're serving such a vulnerable population. And this site is next to another area, another housing development with individuals of similar needs. There's a lot of homelessness traffic in that area. I just want to know what your plan is to keep your residents safe. And
did we lose so sad. I somehow lost this. Everyone, we've got some. Okay. Did everyone hear that from Vice Mayor Smith? I lost a little bit of it.
We lost the end of the question. I heard through keeping our residents safe based on the corridor, but I believe there was a little more to the question after that.
And what is your responsibility to your residents when they're off-site, behavior-wise and safety-wise?
And Cindy, that came up in our meeting earlier last week, if you recall. So that's a great point. Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding item number 4? Okay. For those of you listening at home, we have finished item number 4. We have one item left on our agenda, which is public comment. Bryson, are you with us, and do we have anyone on the phone?
We do not have anyone on the phone at this time.
We answered all of their questions. All right. That means we have this next meeting topic to discuss. It doesn't sound like we necessarily have enough information at the moment to discuss whether or not we can have this meeting. It sounds like there's an email to boards and commissions and general flushing out of holiday scheduling. Are councilwomen okay with dealing with this rescheduling over email, and all the public would be properly noticed, et cetera? Okay. Any other items, last minute comments from Paul or anything while we have everyone? Well, Paul, this is your last HCD meeting.
So it's open mic night on Tuesday afternoon. So I love it. No, I have nothing. I'm just grateful eternally. So Councilwoman Turner, Councilwoman Mosley, and Councilwoman Smith, thank you so much for letting me represent the city at these meetings. And quickly, just a huge thank you to the city team. I work with a bunch of introverts, so they push me out to the camera, but Jonathan Jones, Megan Gaskell, Brian Husky, Nancy Williams, Alex Mitchner, Christina Harris, Emily Ball, Laura Neer. I know I'm going to forget somebody, but there's a whole CD team behind that. And somebody texted me who I missed. I know I missed somebody in there. Mary Brooke Cox, who was great. So they're a great team, and you're in good hands. And they really work hard and care about this work, and we appreciate this. So you hear my voice, but it's their work often that flies to the top, and I'm eternally grateful for working with them, and Nikki for our partnership always and forever, and Council or City Manager Deborah Campbell, thank you as well for all your work with me and leadership. I will miss y'all greatly, but the good thing is I can watch on YouTube and keep y'all straight in the future. And if you need me, I'm a resource. My phone number hasn't changed in a long time. So thank you all very, very much for being a part of the city of Asheville.
Thank you, Paul. Really well said. And to the whole CD staff. And, you know, it should be said, when the pandemic hit, this department took the biggest hit. They worked more and harder than any other department. They got slaughtered. So I appreciate you sticking with us through such chaos, and all of the CD staff. I know y'all have been asked to do a lot in this time, and we just appreciate it.
We are proud of $16 million back into the community, 500 draw requests, and 100 contracts. We've been busy and happy to do it as public servants, and happy to do it under your guidance and leadership, and particularly partnership. So we're very grateful. I'll miss everybody, but I'm a phone call away.
Thank you, Paul.
I want to say something. I remember when Paul came on board, I was so excited about him. His presentation was impeccable. You are definitely a superstar, but I think what the selling point for me is that I sense you have a purity of heart. So continue forward in all you do. We put a lot of trust in you, at least I did. When things are shopped by you and giving your approval, you know, I felt more confident that you put a lot of time and work into it, and you led your team towards, you know, a certain outcome. I think that's very important. You're a great guy, and good luck in all you do.
Really appreciate that, Councilwoman Smith. Thank you. My mom heard that, so that's good.
Purity of heart. It's so true. All right.
And I will just say, I've enjoyed working with you tremendously. I sometimes give you like gut punches, but you take them, you understand them, and you're truly a pleasure to work with. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that as well. And I appreciate those conversations. Tough ones as well are just as important, if not more so than the good ones. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. All right. If there are no other comments, I believe we are adjourned.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.